His name's Phill.
And his name is Tim.
And this is Tim and Phill Talk About Games.
A podcast where Tim and myself get together and talk about games we have recently played and discuss topics in the world of gaming.
This week on the podcast, we're talking about the worst part of the best games, and the best part of the worst games. This is the video game ending.
We'll be chatting about the different types of ends to a video game, how endings are constructed, and the best and worst endings we've experienced. Alright, yes, this is the Tim and Phill Talk About Games podcast. We're back, as you can tell.
Medium-length hiatus.
A medium-length hiatus, exactly. At first, we had Tim experiencing some serious hardware difficulties with his hard drive blowing up. And then, as you can tell from my surrounds, I'm actually in a different house now. I've been moving for the past week and a half. The job is not quite done, but the most important part is that I've got my computer set up.
Yay!
So I'm able to actually do things like that.
There's furniture, nice, but you have a computer.
Oh, no, we have plenty of furniture. So this is a pre-furnished deal, which is actually harder because it means we have to move all of our stuff elsewhere. We have nowhere to put it in the house that we're in.
Nice.
So yeah, it's been pretty cool. There's already been some weird stuff happening in the house, which is interesting.
Ghosts?
Tim can't see this. No. Actually, a drone crashed onto my house the other day.
Oh, really?
You can't see this, but the viewers will be able to if they're on YouTube. And yeah, this guy here crashed onto my roof at 1:30 in the morning. So if anyone from around my area is missing...
He's missing a drone.
a hexcopter, I think. I don't know whether or not that's the official term. It's got 6 legs. It's pretty specky looking. It's been beaten up a bit, but it's still good. I'm sure you could fix it up. It's a fix-up. Anyway, so that's happened. So it's been a little bit weird.
Goddamn drones, man.
Yeah. So we've got a couple of announcements to make before we get into the topic, the ending topic, which has been provided by one of our listeners.
Beginning of the end?
Yes, the beginning before the beginning of the end. Good call. So the first one, and I'll let Tim announce this one, which is a really exciting one, which will be happening later on this year, is
that we have been accepted for giving a panel at this year's PAX Australia. So this is really exciting news for us. We entered the application, I guess.
Competition?
Wasn't a competition. We applied for the panel. And we got accepted, which is fantastic. So we're going to be giving a panel on the 1st of November at 6 p.m. in the Drop Bear Theatre. And the topic for our panel is video games for science.
Yes.
We're looking at the science of video games, science in video games in science, and all things fantastic.
Yeah, pretty much. There's two best things. We're going to be joined by a friend of ours called Megan. She is a teacher here in WA, and she actually uses video games in her teaching. So that's kind of cool. She's done a lot of work with Minecraft. That's kind of like the flavour of the 2 years or
the
whatever.
flavour of the half decade.
Yeah, exactly. And they've just been bought by Microsoft.
$2.5 billion.
Right, man, that buys a lot of blocks.
It does buy a lot of blocks.
Pretty crazy, but yeah, so that's the first thing. So we're really excited about that. It's going to be really cool. So if anyone is in Australia, or if anyone's in Melbourne specifically and is looking to go to the Penny Arcade Expo there, it'd be really, really cool if you could drop in and say hi. So 6 p.m. on the Saturday in the Drop Bear Theatre. That'd be really cool. The other thing that we're going to talk about is the format of the podcast. So we've been chatting about this while we've been having our hiatus, because there was actually literally no way that we could do a podcast.
Which is very frustrating.
It's really kind of annoying. Having all my stuff packed up is kind of annoying. I couldn't play games. I finally got an invite into the alpha of a game I've been waiting for ages, and I couldn't play it for like 3 days.
Absolutely brutal.
So frustrating. Anyway, so we've decided to shift the format a little bit, not very much. We're going to do these main podcast episodes as topic episodes, so we're mainly just going to be talking about a topic in the world of gaming, not necessarily reviews. So the reviews we're going to leave to do individually, so it'll be either Tim or myself talking about a game that we've been playing in the last couple of weeks. Those will pop up every now and again. We're going to put them on YouTube mainly. We're still deciding whether or not we want to include them in the podcast feed. Maybe we'll ask a couple of people that we know listen to the podcast, see if that's something they'd be interested in. These are much shorter little episodes. So the reviews, we're aiming to get between kind of 6 to 10 minutes, really brief, concise overviews of a game. It's usually probably going to be a pretty recent game, because all the games that we've been playing from kind of old school would normally feed into a topic that we're looking to explore. And then topics will be more broad analyses of stuff that's been happening in the world of gaming, or topics that we feel need a bit of exposition, or even just topics that we're interested in and that we want to talk about. Like today's one, we got that from a reader, I shouldn't say reader, a listener.
Watcher, viewer.
Watcher. Yeah, he asked us a question, so we're just kind of going to devote an episode to answering that question to the best of our ability. So yeah, we're just kind of switching to the main podcast episodes will be about topics rather than specific games, and then we're going to review specific games in sort of more free form. We'll upload them when they get done kind of thing. So if we've been playing a game for a few days and then we'll review it and then we'll put it up, it'll kind of happen every now and again rather than like a set schedule.
When they're done.
Yeah,
when there's something worth talking about, essentially.
And because they're shorter, like, it'll be a little bit more, probably more frequent, to be honest, because they're not that hard to put together.
Yeah.
And the podcast will still be more like a fortnightly thing, where we kind of dig down into a particular topic. With all that out of the way, we should probably dig down into said topic. Actually, before we get to that, shout-outs.
Quick shout-outs.
Yay! So today we have shout-outs to people that have followed us on Facebook. We have 2 new people. We have Paul Dean, who's a good friend of ours, who has recently kind of gone life imitates gaming and has bought himself a go-kart and is racing go-karts now, which is probably the coolest thing I've ever seen.
Yeah.
Like, he had his first race the other day and he got into a scrape and all this kind of stuff. So it was really cool. I'm looking forward to actually going down and seeing how he does. Thanks Paul for following us on Facebook, really appreciate that. And we also had, and I've looked up the pronunciation specifically to see if I can get this right, Marta Wonarovich, I think, Wonarovich. Anyway, thank you very much, follow us on Facebook, and much appreciated.
And we've got some YouTube followers as well. We've got Peter Paoliello. Paoliello?
Yeah, let's go with that.
Let's go with that. We've got Calipha Davies, who I hope is actually a caliph, which would be awesome to have an actual caliph following us on YouTube. And Indira Van Eaton.
We're sorry.
Indira.
We're so sorry.
You should see it when I'm teaching and doing a roll call. It's fantastic. So I murder so many names, and the death stares you get from students as they're going, that's not right, and it's borderline racist. I wish you didn't do that.
We should really get better at this, because we live in Australia and we're supposedly a really multicultural country, and yet we're so bad at pronouncing names.
It's hard.
Anyway, it is hard.
Do you want to read out the email that we got?
I think we should. So this is the email that prompted the discussion that we're going to have today, and it comes from Stanyo Zelev. And Stanyo, you're actually the first person that emailed us, and I actually had a really good conversation with Stanyo. He has started a blog, and I will plug that at the end of the show, but I don't actually have it up on my website. I haven't got it up on my screen at the moment. But he sent us an email regarding our Transistor episode. This is what he says. I was listening to the Watch Dogs and Transistor podcast, and I was wondering if you found the ending of Transistor as abrupt as I did. Not so much in the sense that it was rushed, just that it sort of happened without any real sense of build-up, that we were going to get into the finale. Bastion made it very clear when the endgame was just around the corner, but with Transistor it seemed to come out of nowhere. It was a strong ending, but I felt it was somewhat undermined by the fact that it was so quick. Playing through New Game Plus also didn't have additional story elements like in Bastion, which I was slightly disappointed by. I still love the game, I think the mechanics are brilliant and very flexible, and the art design and attention to detail is astonishing, and the soundtrack is just amazing. The only area I think it lost me was with the ending. I would love to hear what you guys thought about that. So first up, thank you very much, Stanyo, for emailing us. It was very kind of you, and thanks for taking the time out to actually try and prompt us into thinking about this kind of stuff. So this is really cool. If anyone else has any topics they'd like us to talk about, please send through. We've got a list, but it's certainly mutable. We can move stuff around. So, in order to tackle this question, to answer your first question, did we find the ending as abrupt as Bastion? We can't
answer that one.
Yeah. We both have had real issues with the game crashing constantly. I got around about, I think, halfway through. I think, Tim, you got a bit further?
Yeah, I got at least 2/3, maybe 3/4. I could certainly see where it was going, though. I'm pretty sure I was coming up to the finale. It was being telegraphed, so you did know it was coming. But yeah, I had the same problem where an update came through and all of a sudden it just crashes on launch, which is very frustrating.
Yeah, so I couldn't actually, no matter what I did, I tried reinstalling, I actually tried reinstalling my Steam, because my Steam's actually been mucking up lately.
Unrelated issue, but still frustrating.
Completely unrelated issue, and really annoying issue, but anyway, we'll not talk about that. And Transistor just basically started crashing on startup, which I think actually happened to the person who we gave the game away to, so it's obviously something to do with Transistor is just really mucking people about. Anyway, in order to make up for the fact that we can't answer your question directly, we thought we'd dedicate the entire episode to talking about endings.
It is a good topic. It is a very, very interesting topic.
It is indeed. I guess to start, Tim, if you wanted to go through the different types of story endings, we've thought of a few.
Even though we haven't finished Transistor, I know exactly what he means in terms of a game that just abruptly ends. There've been several games that I've played in the past where you reach the ending and then it's sort of like credits roll and you're back at the loading screen, and you're like, well, I'm not really sure what just happened there. I don't really feel like I've accomplished anything. You know, I feel like the game just sort of stopped. In the way, I mean, there might be a boss fight at the end, but boss fights, whether or not those are a good idea at all, is an entire different debate.
Yeah.
So, and again, it depends as well on the type of game that you're playing, because some games don't have obvious endings. For example, a puzzle game doesn't have necessarily an ending because, you know, there is no linear narrative or dialogue going on.
No.
So games that have the traditional 3-act structure are much easier to sort of talk about in terms of endings because they have, you know, a resolution. It's the end of the 3rd act.
Well, I mean, I'd argue that sometimes mobile gaming does, I mean, like a puzzle game like, I don't know, Puzzle Quest, that kind of does. There are examples where they merge the two, like they actually give the limited amount of levels that you have. Usually in a puzzle game, I mean, as long as we're not talking about like an infinite puzzle game like Tetris or something like that, although I think Tetris even has an ending, it just kind of stops.
No, it's an awesome ending. You have the space shuttle launches.
Was that on Game Boy? Was that in the actual game?
In the real one, yeah.
Oh, okay. Anyway, like a lot of these puzzle games nowadays, you know, they'll have a limited amount of levels, whether or not it's 50, 100, 200, 1,000, whatever, as long as they're not some kind of social media puzzle game. And they will try and have some, even if it's like, you know, inch-deep, superficial story that's egging you on, like, you know, like I say, Puzzle Quest, you know, had kind of an RPG kind of feel going to it, whereby you're solving puzzles, but you're actually attacking things and saving people from caves and that kind of stuff. So, you know, there are usually some concessions. It doesn't matter how superficial it does end up being, but like nowadays it seems like there are very few games that are just purely mechanical.
Yeah. Well, see, the other thing is as well is that even when you've got a puzzle game, most puzzle games these days are designed so that you never finish them.
Oh yeah.
I mean, the whole point of them is that they keep you playing, and then they add new levels, and they get you playing and playing and playing. Because if you stop playing, then they're not, you know, earning money from ads or whatever the monetization is for most of it, especially for mobile games in that respect.
Sure. But anyway, so I mean, they're the ones that we can't really talk about because there's no attempt at an ending, or at least there's no attempt at using an ending as something to affect the player. It's really just, if you finish the game, it's done. Like, it's just, you've completely mastered the game, and that's a good feeling.
Mastery is good, yeah. Like, getting the 100% and unlocking the achievements. I mean, I think the addition of achievements at all, I think the Xbox did a really good job in introducing the idea of achievements, because it gives you a sense of completion, a sense of finale to a game that might not necessarily normally have it.
Absolutely. Having said that, one of the both best and worst feelings I've had is that I did I love the game Super Meat Boy, and I said this a couple of times already on the podcast, I'm sure, is that getting the Golden God achievement, which is really, really hard. You have to 100% the game, basically, or more than 100% the game, which doesn't make sense. That's another topic entirely. And all you get really is a little achievement that pops up in the bottom right corner going Golden God. Like you've 100%
Well done.
of the game. And that's it. Like there's no actual coding in the game that acknowledges the fact that you've done this ridiculous feat. And trust me, it was hard. Like, it was really hard to get that. I put a lot of hours into that, and all I got was kind of a little achievement. And
all you got was that t-shirt?
Yeah, exactly. Like, it was kind of that feeling of, man, I feel good because I'm one of the few people in the world that has done this, but at the same time, like, a little bit more credit, please. Like, that'd be great. Like, acknowledge me. I need more than this. I need more than a little achievement.
Well, I mean, so one thing that Steam has done is, again, giving you an avenue to sort of display those achievements on your Steam profile, which is kind of a cool thing as well.
Yeah,
if Steam gave you a reason to look at Steam profiles, which there is basically no reason to do so.
There really isn't, yeah. So yeah, I mean, one ending which is not particularly interesting to talk about is that kind of mastery ending, like completing a game, and what you get is just the feeling of having 100% of it, pretty much. And that, as we say, not a bad thing. Really good to finish a puzzle game, especially one that's quite mentally taxing, or like one that's quite, you need quite good hand-eye coordination, such as Super Meat Boy. That's a good feeling. To 100% a game, really, really good feeling, but not exactly something that we can talk about for an hour. So
no.
Probably going to move on to more narrative structures, which are where it gets more interesting, I think, and probably where Stanyo was kind of intending the conversation to go.
Absolutely, yeah. So the other really interesting one is the concept of the New Game Plus ending. Now, that's what he mentions in the email, and it's the mechanic that Bastion uses, where when you finish the game, you can then restart the game, but you can use the things that you've unlocked in your first playthrough. Yep. So, for example, all the extra fancy power-ups and high-tech weapons and whatever it is that you've had in the game.
Basically, you're OP.
Yeah. But it allows you to tackle the game from a different sort of perspective, allowing you to sort of attempt 100% earlier levels that might have been too difficult without the extra perks. Bastion even offers new challenges in the New Game Plus where you can add modifiers, and Transistor does the same thing. You can add modifiers that actually make the game more difficult, gives you an increase to your score and experience and all the rest of it. But it's an interesting way of approaching that. Now, the cool thing with Bastion was that it actually built the New Game Plus mode into the story.
Oh, right.
So, did you finish Bastion?
I finished Bastion, and I think I did actually go into New Game Plus, but I'm not sure how far I got into it. I think I kind of started playing, and I was like, yeah, I've done this. I don't really need to do it again.
Yeah.
Kind of thing.
Well, without giving away too much of the ending of Bastion, because, and again, Bastion is one of the best games. It's on my sort of top 10 list. Yeah. Definitely one that you should look into getting if you haven't played it. And it's also
be cheap
really
nowadays.
Cheap at the moment as well. At the moment, just all the time. Because it's been out for a while now. And Steam is a thing. So the ending of Bastion, without giving too much away, implies that the game is sort of cyclic. Cyclic. However you want to pronounce it. It's a bicycle.
Cyclical works.
Yeah, cyclical.
Anyway.
So the game is the story itself. The end of the game kind of loops into the beginning of the game in a really novel and interesting way. So that the New Game Plus really works well in a game like Bastion. And again, with a game like the Stanley Parable, another game that uses the New Game Plus mode, where you play the game over. In fact, with Stanley Parable, you have to play it over and over again. Like, there is no way to play the game that doesn't involve you playing it multiple times, and might be dozens or even dozens of dozens. The New Game Plus mode in Stanley Parable again kind of works into the story, the concept of repetition, the concept of that cyclic nature of things. So that works well. I don't see how, again, I don't know exactly how Transistor ends, but I don't really see how Transistor could go down a cyclical story as well.
No, it seems much more linear.
And if they did, I would be very disappointed because I think that's kind of it's a great mechanic, but you can't use that twice in a row in your only 2 games.
Yeah, exactly. And so by acknowledging the fact that Transistor and games like it are a linear narrative, that means that we can kind of try and explore what makes a good linear narrative and therefore what makes a good ending. Because what we're really talking about here is good storytelling, right?
Right.
Like a good ending is only as good as... A good ending requires a player to be really, really invested in a game, essentially, to care about the ending. Because otherwise, you're not going to finish the game for a start. If the game's not good and hasn't grabbed you during the game, you're either going through it through pure pig-headedness, which I will put my hand up as saying I've done before.
Oh yeah, done that one.
Or, you know, some other aspect of the game is enjoyable enough for you not to really care about the story, and that seems to be the bet that a lot of large game companies make, in that they think that their mechanics are good enough to carry a game without having much of a story, but we won't.
They're often wrong.
They're often quite wrong. But yeah, so the premise is that, you know, a good ending relies on a good narrative. And there's a reason why some endings are, you know, stay with you for longer, and there's a reason why some endings will fly straight out of your head as soon as you've finished. So I guess what I wanted to talk about was when have you felt that a game like Transistor, apparently, like, when have you felt like a game has kind of ended too quickly, and why did you think that? Like, what was it about the story, or what is it about, or what is it about stories in general that would mean that you think that a game has ended too quickly?
Yeah, well, if it's too quickly, I guess the idea is that it hasn't resolved everything that's happened in the game so far. Right. That's one way of it ending too quickly, and so would that be because they've tried to open it up too much, like they've introduced too many characters, or is it like they've... Well, there are so many reasons as to why it might have happened.
Yeah,
there's multitude. I dare say there's a near infinite number of ways that you can do it incorrectly. Equally, I would say there's a near infinite number of ways you can do it correctly as well. We just haven't seen them all yet, because they're infinite. Because time and entropy is a thing. So one of the examples that you can't really ignore here is Mass Effect.
Right.
Now, going on record, I liked the ending to Mass Effect.
And by Mass Effect, you're saying the Mass Effect series.
The whole series, yeah. Mass Effect 3.
There was, if people aren't aware of the history behind this, there was a massive cluster complaint about the ending of Mass Effect 3.
Huge backlash,
I think they eventually changed it. I'm
they
not
didn't,
actually 100% up.
So they didn't change it. What they did was they added more content to try and explain what was happening in the end. Because I think it was kind of high-end concept stuff that was being sort of discussed, and it wasn't done well, but that's not to say I didn't like it.
Right.
So this is an interesting sort of concept, because the ending itself wasn't a bad ending. Conceptually, and the way the narrative was sort of playing out, I really liked the ending. I feel it could have been implemented a lot better. One of the big complaints was that there are 3 endings to Mass Effect as a series, and they've called them the blue ending, the red ending, and the green ending, because what happens is the animations that happen based on your ending, while the actual concept of the 3 endings are different, the animations are very similar, but with a different color palette. So one has a green color palette, and one has a green explosion, essentially, and one has a red explosion, one has a blue explosion. The 3 different types of explosion do mean 3 very different things, to be fair.
Right.
But again, without giving away the ending and spoiling a game that people might have actually enjoyed. The 3 endings are very distinct from each other, and have real consequence. Now,
but I mean, I guess the lesson there is that the endings are so powerful because, and people got so upset about it. I remember the internet being on fire about this, but like, it got into mainstream
people were
media.
calling for blood.
I know, and they obviously did a really good job with the story. Like, that's why an ending is powerful.
Absolutely. And Mass Effect is one of my favorite games of all time. It is an amazing series. And it is so good because it is so incredibly emotionally evocative. Like, it really grabs you by the heartstrings and doesn't let go. You feel genuine feeling for a lot of the characters in the game. And not having a sense of, full closure with some of those characters was really painful. That said, like, one of the ending that I chose, which I think... I don't remember which color it was, to be honest. I think it was called the Destruction ending.
Right.
Something happens as a result of that ending that I had not factored in my decision. Like, I was sort of weighing up the odds at the end. I'm like, all right, which of these... Because this is another annoying thing with the ending, was that there are 3 buttons, essentially. There's ending 1 button and ending 2 buttons, which is kind of a bit naff. I would rather that your choices determine the ending rather than being able to override all your choices. And
what is literally a quick time event at the end of the game.
Yeah. So I was weighing up my choices, and I thought, yep, this is the one that I'm the most comfortable with. And then I chose it, and then there was a consequence, a side effect to that I hadn't considered, and that it gutted me. Like, I literally fell to my knees, and I was winded. I just could not believe what I'd just done. Right. And that's got to be a good ending, right? Like, that's got to be well done if it can do that.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Now, the question I have for you is the reason why, well, some might argue, is that the reason why Mass Effect was able to, have such a really grand story, grand ending, grand everything, like really well narrated, really well crafted story, was because they had $1 bajillion to spend on it.
Absolutely.
Right? So,
not that guarantees a good story.
Well, that's my question to you.
Is,
yeah, no. Well, yeah. Well, Destiny, come on, it's like co-op MMO emptiness. Anyway, neither of us have played it, I don't think, but that's what we're hearing on the internet. The question that I'm asking you is that necessary? Obviously, all the voice acting and all the awesome graphics and all that kind of stuff brought you into the story. So was enabling towards the story.
Totally.
So do you need that stuff, or is text enough? Like, not just for you. Like, nowadays, like, do you think that a developer could get away with text? I'm not entirely sure.
So it's a hard choice. I mean, Morrowind was, for me, is the game that comes up when I think of games that are text heavy, because
that was 10 years ago, right?
Oh, possibly even longer now. I feel quite old. I feel dizzy and faint when I think about it.
So, like, and its ending was powerful. Like, you ascended. Essentially, you became.
Not even just the ending. The entire game was powerful, even though it was just text. Like, there were endings to individual quests in the game that felt really sort of solid and good.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I kind of wanted to focus on endings in general, but like. It seems like nowadays you wouldn't be able to get away with not investing all that stuff in order to get people emotionally involved. Like, it seems like the emotional involvement of gamers nowadays is quite dependent on other factors, not just good storytelling. You also have to make sure that the good storytelling is, involves good graphics, involves good voice acting, involves all this stuff. Like Transistor, even Transistor, even though it's an indie game, it's polished to within an inch of its life. Like, it looks amazing, and I'm not sure.
And plays amazing. Like, the game is a good game.
So
barring the
Transistor
bugginess.
be... Well, barring the fact that we haven't been able to complete it because it keeps crashing. But, okay, in your mind, take Transistor and get rid of Logan, get rid of his voice.
No. I don't want to live in that world, Phill.
It's a horrible world to live in. But, get rid of the voice, get rid of the really, really polished graphics, maybe make it, I don't know, 16-bit or something like that. Or even just keep the graphics the same. And just reduce it to text and, what you're able to kind of glean from the environment. Is that still a strong story?
I think, yes.
Is that still a strong ending?
I think it's a really interesting story. And I love this sort of... almost Romeo and Juliet inspiration to some of the parts of the story as well. Like, I think the way the relationship between the two in the game has been constructed was very well done, and that again pulled some heartstrings in a really interesting way that I was quite sort of proud of in a game.
Yeah. The only other thing, so while I think of it, I know I'm kind of quick firing questions at you, but so you said earlier that you kind of thought that the game was starting to tell you that the end was coming.
Well, in the sense that there was this whole Camarilla group of bad guys in the game, and I was reaching a point where things like the world was falling apart, and I'd already taken out 3 of them. There's only one left.
So yeah,
there were things that were telegraphing that the end was coming. But I totally know what you mean in terms of, even in that sense, a game ending too quickly, because the same thing happened with the Banner Saga, and I really, really enjoyed the Banner Saga. But the way it ends is really sudden. Like you know that you're coming up to something big, but then something happens in the game, and you're like, "Oh no, that's terrible!" And then the game ends, and it was credits, and I was like. Seriously? You can't stop it there. Like, if it was a serialized TV show, I can understand the cliffhanger ending, but you can't leave, a movie there unless you're planning to come back with, the sequel.
Well, the thing I was wondering is that, okay, so you knew that Transistor was going to end because you knew there was 4 bad guys that you needed to take out, or however many it was. It's the same in a lot of games. There's gewgaws that you need to collect. Like, you have to get 100 diamonds or whatever.
And when you're at Diamond 98, you know you're near the end.
Yeah, exactly. You have 6 acts in a book that you're, like, I don't know, there's some external narrator or something, and you know that you're getting towards the end of that book, or whatever. Do you think that players need that? Or is it okay to do the Banner Saga thing and just kind of go at your own pace and end it without... Like, that obviously is a really powerful way of doing things, because you are essentially leaving the player with no way of knowing when the game is going to end, except for maybe their own sense of how stories are paced. It seems like there is a bit of tension there.
Yeah, I think it is okay, so long as, again, I mean, the irony there is that if the ending isn't telegraphed, it has to be very impactful. Like, it has to say something, and if that ending is to leave you questioning something or to leave you wanting more, then you need to make it obvious that that was your intention and not just bad design.
Because the only thing that I'm thinking of is the fact that, you know how sometimes, like nowadays with movies, and I know we're referring to other media quite a bit, but, this is all storytelling, essentially.
Yeah, it's interwoven.
It's all storytelling. Like, a lot of movies nowadays, especially the comic book movies, there seems to be a very specific pacing to the movie, and you get to that half an hour before the end or so, and it starts the big battle above some city, and you know that it's going to end perfectly fine, everyone's going to be all right, and you know that the end is going to be coming in about 20 minutes because that's how long the movie is.
Yeah.
To me, that takes away from the ending. Like, it definitely
in a lot of ways, I think it does as well. Yeah.
Those tropes of, okay, I've got X number of items to collect before the end of the game, or I've got X number of bosses that I need to finish before the end of the game. Like, it seems like the really impactful endings kind of do away with that. Or they make them so that they're kind of there, but the story is so
they make them meaningful in other ways.
Yeah.
So one of the bad,
I don't know whether or not
the bad endings in that respect, I think, is the Borderlands 1 ending.
Right.
So that was a game where it was telegraphed all the way through. You knew exactly what you were doing. I mean,
you're looking for the vault.
You're looking for the vault, and then the little AI voice in your ear is telling you that this is the vault.
Yeah.
And then the giant tentacle monster comes out of the vault, and you're like, well, this is unlike anything I've seen in the entire game. This has to be the final boss.
Yeah.
And it's a difficult fight, and you fight, and you fight, and you fight, and you kill it. And then you get into the vault, and you open it up, and it's essentially empty. Now, the fact that it is essentially empty is the problem here.
Yeah.
If the vault was actually empty, I think it would have been a better ending.
Yeah.
Because the whole point of that end of the story was that the vault was empty.
Yeah.
That was meant to be the point of the ending. But because they did give you some loot, it was just bad loot.
It was just disappointing.
It was really disappointing. You're like, well, I've just sunk 12 hours and a lot of time and blood and sweat and tears into this game, and I've finally finished the boss, and you've given me a handful of whites. Like, what is this? I don't understand.
Yeah, and that comes under the category of endings that are completely
Incongruous.
with the rest of the game. And this happens kind of, not, I wouldn't say fairly often, but I mean, if a game is all about loot, like Borderlands was, like, come on, give us at least an orange. Like, give us a legendary, for God's sake.
Or have it be empty. Like, if that's the point you want to get across, you need to make that point obvious. If you make it confusing, people are just going to get angry.
Exactly. So, yeah, I mean, I suppose endings, they need to fit with the rest of the game, essentially, I guess is what we're saying, is that the pacing of the game, and pacing is a huge part of it, I think. Like, if your game is badly paced and the player is kind of put off balance by that, that's going to lead to an ending that is just not going to leave someone satisfied, I don't think.
Not at all.
So, yeah, I don't know. I guess, I mean, nowadays endings are kind of becoming irrelevant. It seems like, because just about every game nowadays comes out with some kind of multiplayer component where you can transplant your character into the multiplayer equivalent environment and just kind of go ahead
continue on forever. Because again, it's
fragging.
All the concept of as soon as you stop playing, they've lost you. They need to keep you playing.
Well, and I mean, the argument could be made that you've already paid money to some of these companies, but then if they keep you playing on their game, then you're not paying for
exactly
games. So it's kind of the same argument. I mean, what was it that we were talking about Destiny earlier, and neither of us have played it, so full
disclosure.
Well, not disclosure, like I don't know.
What is disclosure? It's
we don't know what we're talking about, essentially, I guess is what I want to say. It seems like they've planned for 10 years of content or something like that.
Yeah, which is crazy, because apparently it's not there at the moment, so maybe they're going to release it next year.
Right, so, and this is essentially a multiplayer game. It's supposedly single player, but the single player is pretty empty.
Yeah.
Unless you're playing you need to play the game co-op, essentially. And it seems like that's the way that games are going nowadays, is that most big games, anyway, most AAA titles, are moving towards more of a, like, single-player, multiplayer coexisting. Like, they're going to put them in there anyway, no matter what, because they know that some people are going to be playing the multiplayer far beyond single player, and they're just in it for the competitive aspect rather than playing through the single player. A lot of people would buy the Call of Duty series, and just play multiplayer.
Yeah.
Not even bother with the single player, which,
the exact opposite of me.
Well, to be fair, it's probably a pretty good idea, because
I like the single player.
Really not that good. Okay, maybe not as good as an example as, say, Battlefield. Battlefield single player, horrendous.
Well,
absolutely terrible.
I'll pay that one.
Yeah, multiplayer, amazing. So endings kind of, I mean, I obviously games are always going to try and tell stories, right?
Mm-hmm.
So there's always going to have to be the art of the ending and trying to nail exactly what it is to make an ending feel good and feel satisfying to the player. But it's the same problem that we've had for ages, like novels. When is a novel really, really good? Is it because it's a surprising ending? Is it because it's a satisfying ending? Is it an ending... Sometimes you get the feeling that with game endings, they're kind of just trying to wrap everything in a nice bow.
Yeah.
I kind of want to see games stray away from that.
Yeah, look, I don't mind how they approach it, so long as they know what they're doing, or what they're trying to do, and they commit to it 100%, I think is the point. If you want to have this particular ending, whether it's an abrupt ending or a telegraphed ending, whatever it is, so long as you making the game know what that ending is meant to be, and you've done everything you can to try and make it obvious that is what you were trying to do, I'm okay with that, because but then I also really like sort of artistic attempts at doing something that might not necessarily work, but I like to see where they've taken it, or why they've done something in a particular way.
Yeah. I mean, there's a couple of examples of games where you play through the whole game, you get really attached to the character, and then the ending is that the character dies.
Yeah.
And that's really good, because it's kind of a literary tradition, I guess, the protagonist dying at the end of the book. It's something that is different to just the, oh, hey, you saved your You know,
Yeah.
Your objective at the start of the game was to save the world. Hey, you saved the world. Good work.
Well done. You succeeded.
Yeah, like it's
Achievement unlocked.
Yeah, achievement unlocked. Yeah, it's a little bit different, at least. You know, and as long as it fits with the narrative of the game, then that ending can be really, really satisfying. So, yeah, I guess, what you were saying about the fact that as long as they stick with what they were trying to do and make it very obvious that that is what they are trying to do, then, you know, go hog wild.
Absolutely. And the one thing you just can't do not write your ending with the knowledge of a sequel. Your sequel needs to be able to stand on its own two legs. If your sequel is relying on an incomplete first game, you are everything that is wrong with this world.
Got some strong feelings there.
It's so bad. Every time I see it, I'm like, you know, the game ends and then like the clawed hand creeps back up and it fades to black. I'm like, no, don't make me do it again. That's just the same game.
Yeah. No,
if you're going to make a sequel, make a sequel. And I think in that sense, I think, like, for example, the redo of Deus Ex was a perfect sequel in the sense that, first of all, it was a prequel. So it wasn't even a sequel. Didn't incorporate any of the characters from the previous game. It just did a really good job at rebuilding that same world. And I think that's a really important thing to sort of take on board when you're doing sequels. But sequels, again, is an entirely different topic.
Yeah, exactly. Although, you know, related, because endings can sometimes, I say, hint towards a sequel.
Hint.
A hint or
with the
just
subtlety of a sledgehammer.
Blatantly be like, yes, we were told the game is going to do well, so we're going to put in an epilogue.
The grace of a cannonball.
And sometimes endings, you know, hint towards a game that never comes. Half-Life 3.
Yeah, well, that is, it's coming.
Yeah.
We know it's coming.
It'll come eventually.
And we'll love it. We won't have any other choice. It's like Big Brother all over again.
All of the jokes about Half-Life 3 being confirmed will be gone.
Yeah.
Thank God.
Yeah, no, then just move on to 4.
Just start dividing everything into parts.
So, I think, summing it up, if you had to say best video game ending of all time, what would it be? If you can't pick one, you can pick 3, because I can't pick one and I can only pick 3.
Well, I think, even though I've just said that the wrapping everything up in an ice bow after you've saved the world ending is like the worst ending ever, I'm gonna have to go and say probably one of the best ones. Not necessarily the best ending, because there were so many of them, but the best implementation of endings was probably in Chrono Trigger.
Yeah.
Because of the way that they handled that. Time travel is a really, really hard thing to do in games, and to make
anything.
Well, in real life.
Especially in real life.
And the way they handled that was really, really cool. The way that your choices... I mean, I still don't think I've gotten all the endings in that game, and I've played it through many, many, many times. All the choices, all the way that they worked that into what was a really cohesive whole was really impressive, I think. Mm-hmm. That's probably my top. And the fact that you were so emotionally invested in the characters by the end of it that you really cared what happened. And in some of them, some main characters die, and you feel horrible. But that's just the way it is. Like, that's the ending, and they didn't compromise on that. So it was really, I really enjoyed Chrono Trigger. I know it's such a cliched and like really cop out answer, because Chrono Trigger is so friggin' good. Like, and everyone knows that it's so friggin' good. But
But so is chocolate cake. People don't feel bad about liking chocolate cake.
Yeah, I feel bad about eating it sometimes.
Well, yeah.
What about you? So
again, like I said, I can't separate the 3 in my mind, and those are so Dragon Age Origins, another BioWare game. And BioWare are actually pretty good at endings.
Well, I mean, they're really good at stories, so it would follow.
So I mean, even Mass Effects 1 and 2, even though they blatantly had sequels coming, had really good endings, even though they were the end of a sequel or a prequel or whatever. Like, it was still really well done.
Yeah.
But Dragon Age...
So, yeah. I haven't played Mass Effect, a fact of which you still
haunts me.
Yeah. So, could you... if you were a person that did this, and I don't know who would, but if you played Mass Effect 1 and just stopped right there, would that feel okay? Or
Yes.
was it a cliffhanger?
Now, Mass Effect 1, you could definitely stop at. Mass
Right.
Effect 2, you could stop at, but it finishes with, like, literally one of the characters saying, "This is far from over."
Ah.
So, like,
So that was a pretty big hint then.
yeah, but at the same time, like, you'd completed your objective that was outlined in the beginning of the game. It was just that at
Right.
the end of the game, you complete your objective, and then you
okay.
realize that your objective is actually very small in the grand scheme of things.
Right.
And that was a pretty cool thing. Like, so I mean, you
Just
can't
upping the scale.
you can't spoil this.
Yeah.
But at the end of Mass Effect 2, you defeat one of the Reapers, and then it turns out that the Reaper, which in Mass Effect 2 it is called the Reaper, it turns out he is one of hundreds of thousands of these massive death machines that is about to just devour the entire universe.
Okay.
So, I mean, that was a cool ending that precedes a sequel that doesn't compromise on the fact that there is an obvious sequel.
Right, okay. Cool.
Dragon Age Origins, on the other hand, doesn't have a direct sequel. It does have Dragon Age 2, but they're different characters, and Dragon Age 3 is different characters, which is, I think it's a good thing to do. Dragon Age Origins, which is the first game, ends with a beautiful interactive epilogue that actually describes the culminations of each of your choices, which I thought was done in a really, really fulfilling way, and actually made me feel really good about the game, because it finished, and I was like, well, I know exactly what happened in the world now. Like, there's no wondering about, I wonder what that character did with the rest of his life, I wonder if he ever did go off after leaving my party. I wonder if he did go and fulfill his dream of becoming a baker or, whatever.
Jazz pianist.
Exactly. And, maybe he did, maybe he didn't. And it actually tells you in this epilogue, which was really, really cool.
That's good.
Deus Ex, the first game, is a perfect example for me of the multiple endings. That's what Mass Effect, I think, was aspiring to be and just didn't quite reach it in terms of the actual depiction of it. And that was 3 very different endings based on your actions in the game. One of the endings I don't even think you can get without making a particular choice early on in the game. So that was a really, really well done one.
The really cool thing about the Deus Ex one was that it wove in not only just the end event, like the end action that would end the game, but it was a very interesting and convoluted morality.
Oh yeah,
and
the
ethics
philosophy
choice.
behind it was amazing.
So you had to sit there and think pretty damn hard what you were gonna choose, because it kind of reflected a lot back onto you.
Yeah, that was an amazingly done game. Very few games are ever going to live up to DX1.
No.
And then the final game for me was the little-known game of Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines, which has too many sub-names.
way too many.
And that was done really well because there is technically a correct ending and a whole bunch of wrong endings. And I thought it was really awesome how it just didn't care how you felt at the end. And the thing is, if you get one of the wrong endings in scare quotes, you don't necessarily know that was the wrong ending unless you've technically played it multiple times or have looked up the other endings. But one of them is definitely the correct ending.
Yeah.
And the other ones all suck. But they suck in a way that, vampires, that's unintended pun, but I'm really pleased that I made it. They suck in such a way that it's like, that's terrible that ending happened, but it's also, it was a solid ending, like it wasn't a cop-out.
Yeah.
So, it was literally showing you the consequences of your actions.
Yeah,
and I think that was a really cool thing that they didn't pull their punch on that. They said, you've made a terrible choice here. And here's a suck in the face.
Yeah, exactly. You're going to have to live with that.
Yeah.
Play through the game again if you don't want. Well, obviously you could probably quick load at some point.
Oh yeah, you could just load the game and get another ending, as you can with all the... And then it brings into question the idea of being able to save and load games. Does that cheapen endings and multiple endings and blah, 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 blah. It's
exactly.
Very long and convoluted topic.
So in terms of bad endings. Oh, actually, before we go into bad endings, so the other good ending that I had, which is kind of a a gimmick good ending. There was a game which I never played, but I saw the video of the ending, called Ace Combat Assault Horizon. And normally I don't like QuickTime events, but the ending to this game featured the best QuickTime event in the world, which was you had to press, I think, triangle. This is back on the PS3, I'm pretty sure. You had to press triangle to fist pump, and that was like the end of the game, was you fist pumping.
Pow!
And then the crowd cheering as you have like your girlfriend on your shoulder as you've gotten out of your plane. Yeah, that's a pretty damn good ending, because it was kind of like,
so cheesy.
It's funny. It's so cheesy. It's very aware of itself. Like, yeah, that was cool.
Yeah, bro.
Bro. So bad endings. So the bad, and this kind of says a bit more about what a good ending is and why endings are important. So my bad ending that I thought of was Might and Magic Clash of Heroes. Now, the reason why this is a bad ending isn't because the story is bad, and actually the ending of the stories aren't too bad. Like, the narrative part of it is fine, except one of the characters, who's been a total badass the whole time, like, she went into the underworld and like became basically a goddess of the dead. She just goes off and marries some prince and has a child. Like, that's her ending. It's the most sexist, horrible
it's
thing
terrible.
I've experienced, and she was my favorite character because her like skeleton army was really, really cool. And yeah, that happened. So that's bad in that sense.
We've defeated the big bad enemy. Time to go make babies.
Pretty much. So that was bad in that sense. The rest of the stories were okay, because I think there was 5 characters that you played as. The other thing that was really bad about that ending was that the boss battle, like the final boss, like the big boss that you've been working up to this whole time, the puzzle aspect of the game just goes completely out the window, and it's pretty much random chance as to whether or not you beat him. He's just got overwhelmingly ridiculous abilities, and you can't... I had to play... I'd gone through the game pretty much uninterrupted, like being able to solve all the different puzzles, being able to sort of tactically beat things. Mm-hmm. And then I came up to the last boss. I must have played him like 30 or 40 times before I beat him. Before I got the perfect
random number generator.
Pretty much, before I managed to get an RNG that favoured me enough that his bullcrap abilities didn't just slay me in a turn. And it was so disappointing, because the rest of the game was really, really good and enjoyable. And then you get to the last boss and it's just completely out of whack with the rest of the game. Like, doing that artificial difficulty thing, bad.
Kind of really in a way that Deus Ex Human Revolution did. Didn't have a terrible ending, had actually, I thought, a pretty damn cool ending. Again, just terribly, terribly implemented. Yeah. So the worst ending for me, other than Borderlands 1, in that it was a great ending, but again, really badly implemented, was probably both BioShock 2 and BioShock Infinite. BioShock 2 trying to recreate the ending of BioShock 1, which was an amazing ending. Would you kindly? Yeah. BioShock Infinite, just a crappy ending. Like, just, I don't know, like, the ending was kind of redeemed. And no, so you know what? It wasn't even the ending. It was the bit before the ending. It was the culmination to the ending. That it was like, the ending was great, but it was like having something sweet after eating a whole rotten lemon. It's like, yeah, right. Well, that was nice, I guess, but my stomach's gonna be upset for hours.
Right. It was a cherry on top of a
shit steak. I don't know. I'm like a shark. The best of analogies.
Right.
Yeah.
So yeah, okay. Well, I think we can probably wrap it up there.
Yeah.
We're heading into the hour mark. So yeah, I guess endings, they're pretty important. More important, I guess, is the fact that you need to make sure that you are setting up the game to have a good ending, because there's no point in having a really, interesting and shocking ending if the player never gets to it, because they're uninterested in your game. And yeah, if you're mainly relying on mechanics for your game, maybe some fireworks at the end of the game when they 100% it would be good. Yeah, even Solitaire. Come on, even Solitaire had a cool
has
animation.
A pretty badass ending.
Yeah, all the cards jumping down, amazing. But yeah. So I hope that satisfies Stanyo. I hope we've talked
Sufficiently
enough
and at length enough.
On the topic of endings, and hopefully that makes up for the fact that we hadn't actually finished Transistor. Not through any fault of ours. We're very sorry.
I do really want to finish it.
I do really want to finish it. It was a genuinely excellent game, and it's really frustrating that it just crashes on startup. I might have to see if there's a patch out or something
I'll
like that.
try
to see
again,
if I
yeah.
can fix it. It's been a while. I think it's been a month or two since I tried, so yeah.
Give it a shot.
Anyway, thank you very much for listening. You can find us on the web at timandphil.com and on Facebook at facebook.com/timandphil. When you're spelling Phil, please spell it with 2 L's, otherwise you won't find us. If you want to contact us directly, you can find Tim on Twitter at Dungeon Master. Add him as a friend on Steam as steamcommunity.com/id/ageatus, AGEOTAS, or at his website, which is corsairsanchorage.com.
And as always, you can find Phill on Twitter at ToothSoup, which is just tooth and soup put together. Add him as a friend on Steam as steamcommunity.com/ID/Flaxair, which is FLAXEH, or at his website, toothsoup.com. Thanks for listening.
Cool. No!
My line!
Wrong order. Let's go line.
Thanks for listening.
And happy gaming.